Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a protest is killed in Sudan as two top US diplomats arrive in the country to try to speak to all sides involved in the deepening crisis and urge an end to months of violence in which dozens have been killed in crackdowns on anti-military protests. Also, it's a major step for the fight against COVID-19 in Africa. South Africa has opened a new vaccine plant, the first on the continent to cover the entire process from start to finish. And so far, the Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon has been filled with drama and surprises, but not that many onlookers in the stadiums. Fans have turned out sparsely to Cameroon's venues, many saying that scheduling, cost and COVID restrictions means that it's a bit of a bother. But first, pro-democracy medics in Sudan say that a protester was shot dead in Omdurman on Wednesday as security forces took down barricades erected by demonstrators denouncing the military's takeover of the country in October. At least 72 people have been killed in crackdowns since. The US Assistant Secretary of State and the new US Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa were in the country to try and facilitate talks between ruling generals and pro-democracy civilian groups. Now, one of the biggest of them is the Forces for the Declaration of Freedom and Change. It called for a 2-day civil disobedience campaign over the killing of 7 protesters on Monday. Our regional correspondent tells us more.
Shops, offices and banks were closed across Khartoum on Tuesday and Wednesday. Roads were barricaded and traffic was much lighter than usual. Protesters usually close down these roads as a means of ensuring that people are not able to get to work, thus slowing down the economy, and also making sure that security forces are not able to get around as quickly. Our team on the ground spoke to some of the people participating in the civil disobedience efforts.
The goal of continuing to protest is to overthrow the military council, to overthrow Burhan and Janjaweed militia that are controlling the country until all demands are met towards a democratic transition and civilian rule.
We've had enough of the National Congress Party. They've destroyed Sudan for 30 years. We don't want military rule anymore. We must have a civilian government that protects the rights of Sudanese citizens, their needs, their capacity to make decisions, and right to speak out against anyone by law.
This is not the first time that pro-democracy groups are calling for civil disobedience in the country. Different from the protests that we've seen in recent weeks, the civil disobedience campaign is meant to paralyze the economy and send a strong message to General al-Burhan and the military to step down and pave way for full civilian rule. Now we expect to see more protests in coming weeks, even as the repressive measures by security forces escalate, with so far over 70 people being killed in less than 3 months since the start of the coup.
Caroline Camillo there for us. Now, Congolese police have arrested 2 men in connection to the killing of the Italian ambassador in 2021. The police commissioner for North Kivu province says that the prime suspect, though, is still at large. Luca Atanasio is believed to have been killed by rebels in a failed kidnapping for ransom. The 43-year-old was fatally shot along with a paramilitary officer and a UN driver whilst their convoy was travelling from Goma to Rutshuru. And South Africa's president opened the continent's first end-to-end vaccine manufacturing plant. The facility in Cape Town is a partnership between a US biotech firm, the government and South African universities. President Cyril Ramaphosa said that it is a key step in tackling the global disparities in access to vaccines. The new plant aims to produce 1 billion vaccines a year by 2025. Wasim Kwane tells us more.
A milestone in South Africa's fight against COVID-19.
Thank you very much.
President Cyril Ramaphosa and businessman Patrick Soon-Shiong have opened a new vaccine plant in Cape Town. It's the first in the continent that will house the entire vaccine-making process from start to finish. The South African-born American billionaire wants to transfer technology and materials from his Californian company to scientists in South Africa, turning the country into a major hub for medical technology.
So the idea is these are the kinds of 21st century technologies that as we implement manufacturing in South Africa by South Africans for South Africans and be leapfrog of the rest of the world.
It's no secret the level of vaccination in Africa is less than satisfactory. Just 10% of the continent's population has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. This plant should help turn that trend around.
Africa should no longer be the last in line to access vaccines against pandemics. We will stand on our own. This we are determined to do, and this facility is proof of that.
The plant is expected to be able to produce 1 billion vaccine doses annually by 2025. The factory won't only be used to produce COVID-19 vaccines, though. The goal is to provide future medication for the entire continent.
Mali is reaching out to its neighbours to try and rally support in the wake of sanctions brought in by regional group ECOWAS. The move was in response to the military junta's plans to delay elections by 4 years. Now, generals took over after launching coups in August 2020 and May 2021. ECOWAS's penalties include the closure of Mali's borders and a trade embargo. Bamako is hoping to get Guinea on side, as it's also been suspended by ECOWAS over a coup last September. James Andre tells us more.
Now, what the junta is doing right now is that they have a diplomatic offensive, a counter-offensive, if you will, that is ongoing. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Abdoulaye Diop, is on a tour of the region. He's been to Guinea already. He is speaking also to the Mauritanians. And this evening, he is expected in Algiers to try and break this blocus that is now hitting the country, with everybody very worried here. So, indeed, there has been a slight hike in prices, but people are worried that this could get a lot worse. And of course, there is the big question of the salaries of civil servants here in the country, and of course the military and police, that no one knows if the state will be able to pay them, because indeed the Mali's financial assets have been frozen with these sanctions, and that of course is something which is very, very difficult to overcome.
And Nigeria has just locked down a hat-trick of wins at its smooth start to its Africa Cup of Nations campaign. It faced Guinea-Bissau in Cameroon and has just beaten them 2-0. The squad wanted to head through to the last 16 as the only team with a perfect record, and has delivered on that. Meanwhile, Egypt faced underdog Sudan and sealed their place in the last 16 with a 1-0 win. Overall, though, the tournament has so far been filled with drama and surprises, but not that many bums on seats. Cameroon stadiums have been pretty empty for most of the Africa Cup of Nations games. Many say that between scheduling, cost and COVID restrictions, heading out for most games is a bit of a bother, as our team reports.
This is the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium in Yaoundé. On January 14, over 3/4 of seats at the 40,000 capacity complex were empty as Comoros challenged Morocco at their second group game at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations. Since the start of the tournament, the host country has struggled to fill the stands. Exceptional crowds have only turned out during games featuring the indomitable Lions of Cameroon. Their supporters say they couldn't possibly miss those matches.
I am Cameroonian and I love football. What motivates me is that I've always seen the AFCON on TV. Now that it's here at home, I want to experience it.
But most fixtures have lacked much public support. Many fans have been discouraged by the cost of tickets, which are at least 3,000 CFA or about €5. More than a third of Cameroonians survive on less than €2 a day. Another hurdle is the requirements that everyone entering stadiums prove that they've been vaccinated and show a negative COVID-19 test result.
The first barrier is the vaccine. There are many people who are reluctant to hear about the vaccine. If we add that to the distances to stadiums, it's not really easy. You have to pay a lot of money and find a ticket, which is not easy to find.
In the city of Garoua, more than 1,000 kilometers to the north of the country, the deserted stadiums stand in stark contrast to energetic fan zones like this one. COVID restrictions are less stringent, and so hundreds of supporters have gathered to watch the indomitable lion.
I prefer the fan zone because access is free. A COVID test is not required. You just need a mask and a normal temperature to access the fan zone, and the atmosphere is pure joy.
In a bid to fill up stadiums, the government has called on Cameroonians to fill up venues for the rest of the competition. It has also cut back on civil servants' working hours and class times for students. In some host cities, free transport shuttles have been organized to take fans to stadiums.
That report by our team in the country. And finally, Ethiopians have been paying their respects to musician Nuho Gobana, who's died aged 74. He penned many songs over his long career, often calling for change. He sang in several of the country's languages and influenced many younger artists with his timeless classics. So we'll be leaving you with one of Nuho Gobana's songs, Makabdu. That's it for Eye on Africa. Join us again if you can.
Akka gadin baan jaalalaan na hiitu akka alam baane hidhaa silna gootu.
France 24, your window on the world.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.